Hello, I'm really glad you're watching this. For so many people, we're following sleep advice for the 3 a.m. wake up that's actually made for men because a lot of the studies have been done on men. So we're following a lot of sleep hygiene protocols and different hacks and sleep tricks that are not made for the female body, the female circadian health or the female nervous system. So this is going to bring you so much clarity, so you're not confused or chasing different solutions. We're going to get really specific here. So you probably don't know why this is happening. And that's what I want to show you. Okay. So by the end of this, you'll really understand it maybe for the first time. And I'm going to show you clear things you can do about it. So I know this because I lived it for many years. I was waking at 3 a.m. most nights. I had 2 episodes of insomnia. And then I was very familiar with the next day, hunger was really high. My mood was really low. I was starting over again and again and again with new routines. I felt it was very difficult to stay consistent with anything. Usually at the 2 or 3 week mark, I was back to square one. So I was just convinced at that point I just wasn't a consistent person. Okay, which definitely isn't the case for you or I. So what changed for me was finally understanding what was happening. And that let me find the right solution instead of doing all the guesswork and piecing so many things together. And it was a very expensive journey. So that's why I do this work now. Sleep hygiene and better circadian health really help, of course, but only if your nervous system is already regulated. If it's not, which a lot of women, it's not, if you're stuck in fight or flight, survival mode, no bedtime routine is going to override that. So that's what we actually need to address properly. But nervous system regulation is a lot more than just a few vagus nerve exercises and regulation tools. Okay. The real explanation is the nervous system doesn't just run on habit. It also runs on hormonal signals. So your estrogen, for example, feeds your calming brain chemicals directly, and progesterone breaks down in the brain into a natural calmer. Okay, working on the same receptors as like anti-anxiety medication. So you've had that support running quietly in the background a lot of your adult life. So you never really felt it because you never needed to. Then you're hitting past your mid 30s. Those hormones start to fluctuate. They're not crashing at once, just unpredictably, week to week, cycle to cycle. And that fluctuation is the signal your nervous system runs on. Really important to understand this. And when the signal starts to become unreliable, when the hormones are fluctuating, that's when your baseline changes. Your body ends up more easily stuck in fight or flight. We're not as resilient to stress anymore. And it's much more difficult to switch off. And that explains a lot of other things that's happening. So just understanding that concept, as we get past, we'll say mid 30s, we notice hormones start to fluctuate and our stress tolerance decreases a little bit. Okay. So the nervous system stuck like that, it can't switch off at night. That's your 3 a.m. wake up. So it keeps cortisol elevated, which is why blood sugar swings and cravings hit as well. If you're been chased by a wild animal and like fight or flight, typical fight or flight, of course your body's going to want a glucose release to escape from the danger it perceives, but you're actually sitting in front of a desk, but you're still getting that glucose release. So you still are wanting the sugar or the glucose craving. So this keeps you reactive, you're a bit snappier, you're a little bit more emotional. And it's why, the negative self-talk is much louder. Okay. Because when you're in, wearing the fight or flight goggles, you perceive things very, very differently. Okay. Your brain is actually scanning for threats a lot more. So it's also why, real rest feels impossible and you feel maybe guilty for that and you scroll instead to numb the mind to get a bit of dopamine. And it's why you keep defaulting back to old familiar patterns instead of anything new. Because a nervous system on alert, familiar feels much more safe than new and unexperienced. Okay. If your nervous system is regulated, you're much more open to new. When it's not regulated, you're in fight or flight, maybe freeze, you're much less receptive to new novel things, even if they're good for you, even if that's eating healthier meals in a mindful way, even if that's not drinking wine at night, even if that's not scrolling all the time. Okay. Even the ones that feel and they're not good for you, they're still familiar and they've kept you alive so far. So the nervous system gravitates towards them. That's the body protecting you in the only way it knows how. Okay. So the mismatch is when you try to fix this with a better bedtime routine, more willpower or starting again on Monday, you're using like a behavioral fix for what's actually a physical problem. So the category is wrong. That's why 2 weeks is always usually the ceiling, 2 to 3 weeks, and why you've started more times than you can count. Very frustrating cycle. You weren't failing at all. You were just using the wrong map. Okay. And the part that trips up even women doing everything quote unquote right is, say you did balance your blood sugar, you did fix your sleep hygiene, you did sort your circadian rhythm. Okay. They're very important. But one input we didn't fully address is the nervous system piece. Okay. So, like, for example, self criticism, rushing through the day, constant stimulation, that's they're all inputs as well. So a nervous system running on a lower hormonal floor, like because your estrogen and progesterone are lowering and fluctuating, that doesn't have the reserves to absorb stress the way it used to. So you can do everything right physically and still be wide awake at 3 a.m. Mental and the behavioral load are never fully addressed. So that's not the stress story you already ruled out. It's just an unaddressed input problem on a system with very little capacity and space left over. Okay, so we're going to do one thing now to help that. It's a very simple, actionable tool just to get the ball rolling. So it's called orienting, and it's built for exactly what we just talked about. A brain that's stuck scanning for threats. Without moving the rest of your body, just turn your head slowly and actually look around the room you're in. Notice the corners, the light, the colours, what's actually there, and take your time doing it. Okay, let the eyes land on something you like a picture, a window, a plant, and stay there for a few seconds. That's the whole part of this. And why that works, just simple orienting. So simple. Think about when you're going for a walk. It feels so regulating to look around and scan your area. Your nervous system has been scanning for danger this whole time in the background. When you're in fight or flight or survival, it's always scanning, okay, without you asking to. That's why it's very difficult to drop into restorative sleep as well. So orienting does the scan on purpose, so the brain can actually register that nothing here is a threat, okay? That's why it's so dysregulating to sit in front of a laptop all day looking at one spot. Your body, you're not scanning the area, okay? It tells you we're safe right now. And, that's going to take like 20 seconds, but it's a very, very, very positive safety signal to the body. You can do that anywhere, So that's one lever you can pull for sure, one tool, part of the overall regulation puzzle. Nervous system regulation tools are one piece of that puzzle. So regulation, as I said, isn't one trick. It's coordinated. It's your nervous system, your movement, your blood sugar, your mindset, your sleep, all moving together with your hormones week to week. So that's not something one exercise is going to fix. And I think a lot of people overly rely on the tools. Very, very helpful, as I said, but not the whole nervous system regulation puzzle. So this is not something you should have to figure out alone, guessing which lever needs attention at any given time. So let's get into that a bit more. Just to put this into perspective so it's more tangible, Nora is a client who's 49 and she's in my membership. And she was waking at 3 a.m. for many years. So she'd try magnesium bisglycinate, the different sleep apps, earlier bedtimes, breath work even, okay? What changed for her wasn't a new habit. It was just addressing the whole system underneath the habit. So the habits could actually stick, okay? Not one piece of it at a time. She went from over a decade of waking consistently at 3 a.m. and rarely falling back to sleep, to sleeping through the night, majority of nights, and actually waking up with energy instead of feeling, groggy, hungover, relying on coffee. Not because she found more discipline, but because she stopped trying to fix the wrong thing alone. As we spoke about earlier, she was no longer heavily relying on the sleep hygiene piece. She started to understand what was actually stopping sleep, and it was more related to the nervous system. So a nervous system on high alert, that's not going to handle more decisions very well. Decision fatigue isn't a personality trait. It's a symptom of being dysregulated. So most memberships will hand you a library and say, good luck, more content, more options, more figuring out. And that can be really helpful for someone who's in a regulated state and can go through that material and has the capacity. But that's for a lot of people who are feeling dysregulated, that's more load on a system that's already past capacity. Okay. That's why I made the opposite. Inside the membership, there's a 21-day challenge every month. One very simple action every day. 2-minute video telling you what to do. Rotating through every piece of this puzzle I've been showing you, the blood sugar, the mindset, the regulation tools, the evening routines. You open it, you watch it, you do it, nothing to figure out, nothing to decide. This is what I wish I had back around the time of COVID when I just wanted clarity. Okay. Didn't want to figure it out myself. There's a monthly live group call as well with me. Your nervous system as well regulates better when there's connection. That's not a nice to have. It's very much science and how behavior becomes really successful when you have a community around you. So that's important. A community of women who very much know what the 3 a.m. wake up feels like, and they're on the other side of it. There's also a full archive, every challenge from day one, that are when you're ready to go deeper, when you have the capacity. That's why it works, not because there's more, but because there's less and it's the right structure and order, and there's support around it as well. So the membership is €37 a month with no contract. Cancel any time before the next billing date. I really hope this finally made sense of something that might have been very confusing for years. The explanation maybe you were missing. I know it was incredibly important when I fully understood this and understood I was probably putting too much emphasis on the sleep hygiene piece of the sleep puzzle. But I really needed to work more on all the different pieces of regulation, from blood sugar to gut health, to movement, to the mindset work, everything I do in the membership. So now that you have it, the question is what you do with it. If you want it laid out step by step, I would love to have you in the membership with the community. Hopefully I'll see you inside there. And thank you so much for listening. Feel free to drop me a message if anything resonated.